Welcome to the Killer Innovation Show, the longest continuously produced podcast in history. Each week, Phil McKinney brings you the insights and strategies to amplify your creativity and innovation skills. Here's your host, Phil McKinney.
Hello and welcome. I'm Phil McKinney. This week, we are reaching deep into the archive and bringing you one of our most downloaded shows. Enjoy. Welcome to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are here in the studio. We've actually been here over the last couple of weeks now, which has kind of been unique. We're getting ready to head on the road. We'll actually be on the road for the next 4 weeks. I'll be in Europe for 2 of those weeks, coming up here to take a little break, but also I'm hosting an event in London for about, 200 people or so. And then I'm back to the States, and then I'll be teaching an innovation bootcamp course in Silicon Valley, and then I'm off to the TED conference. So depending on when this show plays, those things may actually be in the future or they may be in the past. This is a show that we do what we call live to tape. We pre-record them, given my travel schedules, and then they get slotted in to be broadcast on the radio show, and then to be reformatted into the podcast. So depending on when you hear this, if you happen to be in the area, if you're going to be at TED, or you're one of the listeners who is signed up to be in the Innovation Bootcamp course, look forward to seeing you there. And today's topic, I'm taking a step back and thinking about creative inspiration. What is it that inspires us to do what it is we do? If you're listening to this show, and I've built my entire career around creativity and innovation. And again, I always have to repeat this. One of the points that I constantly have to make and remind people of is that everyone is creative. Everyone. When we solve problems, we're using a uniquely human ability to look and solve complex issues. And we do this every day. Like making dinner and realizing that you're missing an ingredient for a recipe. What do? You don't throw it out or stop or cower in the corner. You go into the cabinet, you go into the refrigerator, and you look for a substitute ingredient and you try it out. You go and you take a risk. You put something into the recipe in hopes that it either makes it better or solves your problem. Or we have a plumbing problem and stand in the aisle at the home improvement store, and by looking at all the parts that are available at a Home Depot or a Lowe's, for instance, here in the US, and you put those parts together. That's creativity. We see a problem a client is having. If you're in the business world and, whether you're in sales, marketing, and engineering, product delivery, whatever, you see a client that's having a problem, and you combine your products maybe with other companies' products and solutions, and you solve that client's problem. That is creativity. And we use our creativity every day. Have you ever seen someone else who seems to come up with better solutions or problems than you do? For instance, being a better amateur photographer. I have a coworker from HP, Ernie Vader. He still works in sales at HP. He's a sales guy, lives up in Minneapolis. And what's surprising is, one, he's a great salesperson. Clients just absolutely love him. But he's also one of the most unbelievable photographers. Some of his photographs are now appearing on the front page of jigsaw puzzles. And a few times a year, his photographs are selected as the photo of the day by National Geographic. And I didn't learn this about Ernie until after I left HP and we connected on Facebook and Instagram. Then the light bulb went off on why he was always so creative in his job at HP. What people do outside their jobs creatively can be a spark for the creativity they bring to their jobs. Have you run into a cook who never looks at a recipe, but takes whatever it is in the kitchen and comes out with great meals? Or how about that guy at the home improvement store who everyone wants to talk to because he solves their problems with simple or elegant solutions? So why are they so much more creative than everyone else? One, they are inspired. Find something that piques your interest, a passion, something that drives them to go beyond, to learn and experiment and continue their learning. In work, it's the corollary to the idea of you work doing something you're passionate about, you'll never work a day in your life. For instance, the guy in the home improvement store may have been my father-in-law. When he retired, he worked part-time at Home Depot in San Diego. When he was in the store, he would have a line of 10 people following him around, waiting their turn. Why? Because he is that good. He could help them solve any problem, electrical, plumbing, home improvement, laying floors, painting, it didn't matter. And he could solve their problems with simple, elegant, and low-cost way. Customers would call the front desk and ask if Dennis was working before they would make the drive over to the store. And why was he that good? Because he had put in more than hundreds of thousands of hours learning his craft, and it showed. What inspires you? One thing I've noticed is you can tell a lot about a person and their passions and inspirations based on, what you listen to. What is it you listen to from the standpoint of a podcast? So, for instance, if you listen to a podcast I listen to called Fro Knows Photo, it's by Jared Pollan. He's been in the podcasting world for a long time. But if you listen to Fro Knows, then you are wanting to improve your photography skills. Why? Now, there are a lot of podcasts that are out there that are, product reviews, etc. What's different about Jared's podcast is the fact that it's one of the best photo podcasts for instructional content, right? If your outside passion is photography, then you should be listening to Fro Knows, right? My passion is around audio, recording studios. I've spent 15 years building and improving and constantly upgrading, my studios in order to improve the audio quality. And I just love what I do when it comes to the podcast. If you're into dance, if you're into cooking or baking or crafts or whatever it is, we live in a world where we have this unending amount of learning and training materials and things that we can take advantage of that people before us just never had. And that's what's allowed for just this absolute explosion of people finding that creativity, finding that spark that's inside of them. So what inspires you? Is it photography? Is it recording audio? Is it creating electric dance music, maybe on Ableton Live? Or is it photography, doing video, cooking, dancing, whatever it is? What is it that inspires you? And what I've found is that passion, that thing that inspires you outside of work will actually come and have a huge impact on your day-to-day job, because having that creative outlook, in my case, this podcast, does have that ability to spark the creativity that you can apply because you're constantly exercising and working that creative muscle. If you do not have something that you're clearly passionate about, then go find something. Whatever that is, go find it. Now, I'm going to argue that one of your passions may be innovation. Why? Because you're listening to this show. If you're listening to the show, you obviously have an interest in passion, or you have an interest in creativity, or you're wanting to learn about other companies and how they do it and how they apply it. But you're listening to this podcast in order to enhance or increase or improve your own skills and abilities for innovation. And so that's your practice. That is listening to this show, is keeping that muscle for you. I would be interested in seeing what your podcast list of other things you're passionate about. Are people passionate about just one thing? No. Do you do innovation and creativity because it's work related, or is it something that you apply outside of work to do and create jewelry, or, like I said, take photographs, whatever it might be? So The second thing, we talk about inspiration, but the second thing is practice. You have to practice it. You can listen to it, but you got to practice it. And one of the myths is that people are just skilled at it. No, it takes practice, and it takes a lot of practice. So we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk about practice. How much is needed to be good at something? How much more do you need to do to be great at something? And then how does this translate into your creative skills? So what is practice? Do I mean by you need to practice to become proficient at creativity and innovation? Well, let's take a look at the definition for the word practice. Practice is defined as 1, to do repeated exercises for proficiency, and 2, practice to pursue a profession actively. Right? So it's not just that you just learn a skill and you stop. It's something you got to continually do. Repeated exercises for proficiency. There is this myth that creativity and innovation is not something you can practice, and that is a myth. You can practice it and you can become proficient in it. Now, I've talked about this before and have given you what I do on a daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis to practice my creativity skills. I do exercises every morning. At the end of the week on Sundays, I go back and look at what I did for the 5 days. Then every quarter, I go back and look at what I did the previous quarter. I'm learning what inspires me, what sparked the best ideas, what was it that maybe certain music I played in the morning generated more ideas. I'm finding what feeds me, and also I'm working on active projects. Some of these may involve some of my nonprofit work, like the work in Rwanda, Africa, or hacking autism. But I'm using problems that I have and I put them down in my notebook and I work on those, and that's part of my exercise, keep my creative muscles. Now, I'll put a link in the show notes over at Killer Innovations to that show where I specifically walk you through my daily, weekly, monthly exercises. Just so you know, it's from season 12 and it's episode number 18. But I'll have a link for that over in Killer Innovation, so hop on over there. So how much practice and exercise is needed to be proficient at something like creativity? Malcolm Gladwell, who's a reporter at the New Yorker and author of a bunch of books, Malcolm wrote an article for the New Yorker where he described a paper in a publication called American Scientist, written by 2 scientists, Herbert Simon and William Chase. This paper, produced 40 years ago, put forward a hypothesis about practice and expertise. Here's a quote from that paper. Quote, "There is no instant experts in chess, certainly no instant masters or grandmasters. There appears not to be on a record of any case, including Bobby Fischer, where a person reached grandmaster level with less than about a decade's intense preoccupation with the game. We would estimate very roughly that a master has spent between 10,000 to 50,000 hours staring at chess positions." End quote. This one paper kicked off a new field of research within psychology to see if they could validate or refute Simon and Chase's conclusion. The results confirmed their research. It takes a lot of practice to be good at something. For example, one researcher, John Hayes, looked at more than 70 famous classical composers and found that they created their greatest works only after being a composer for 10 years. There were 2 exceptions where composers created their best work at 9 years. Now, do not freak out. I'm not saying you need to commit to 10,000 hours or you'll never amount to much. There are clearly different levels of practice. Do you want to be a weekend jogger or do you want to be an Olympic long distance runner? Each requiring a different level of practice and exercise. And most important, commitment. Face it, your other option is you can become a couch potato. You can become the couch potato for your physique and physical exercise and your ability to walk, jog, or run. Likewise, you can become a couch potato when it comes to your innovation and creativity. It is your call. Nobody else imposes it on you. There's no limitation that is imposed upon you. You are in 100% control. So one hint, it's a lot easier to find the time to practice, to exercise, if you're inspired. Is there something that's driving you rather than you just know you need to exercise? Are you inspired by something? So here's a question. What do you want to be in 5 years or in 10 years with your skills, capabilities, and career when it comes to innovation? Think about it. You're listening to me now. What is it you want to be in 5 or 10 years? How are you going to apply your ability to be highly creative, to be highly innovative in your career? Do you want to be a chief innovation officer? A lot of companies are hiring them. If you want to get background on that, go on over to, I think it's probably over on the blog. So it's like Phil McKinney, or you maybe could be over at Killer Innovations. And there's a series of skills that you need to have. But if that's something you want, set that as your inspiration. Do you want to become an innovation consultant? I get emails literally from thousands of you who have or want to hang out your shingle to be an innovation consultant. That's great. Or are you looking to apply your creativity and innovation skills to achieve some other objective? Do you want to find an idea that will lead to the next great cloud application? Then practice and exercise for that. Do you want to find that next great medical technology that saves people's lives? Then practice and exercise on that. It is in 100% your control as to what it is you want to do with your innovation and creativity. Today, if you talk to CEOs, the most requested skill set that CEOs are now recruiting for senior roles within organizations is creativity. They are looking to hire people that have highly tuned creativity as a skill set for them, because they need that human ingenuity, that human creativity to be brought into their organization in order to have that impact. And that is the critical skill. As we've talked about on this show many, many times about this emerging innovation economy, a company's value will get determined by the ability of that team to create and generate ideas. So the question for you is where do you want to be in that 5 to 10 years? What is it you want to do to apply your human ingenuity, your creativity, your innovation? There is nothing that holds you back. Set that goal. Do you want to be a chief innovation officer, an innovation consultant? Do you want to go create the next cloud app, the next mobile app? You want to go create medical devices to save people's lives? Whatever that is, then do that. But to do that, you need to practice that skill and you need to exercise that skill on a regular basis. You cannot be the couch potato. To continue on the topic of creative inspiration and impact, Kym McNicholas, a regular host here at Killer Innovations, recently interviewed Tania Katan about her new book, Creative Trespassing: How to Put the Spark and Joy Back into Your Work and Life. The book looks at the impact of bringing our personal creative exercises into our work. Here is that interview.
Thanks, Phil. Well, you might think that the best innovation comes from being nose to the grindstone, thinking about it, and thinking about that next billion-dollar idea. But that's not the case. I have with me Tania Katan. She is an author of Creative Trespassing: How to Put the Spark and Joy Back into Your Work and Life, and actually become a better innovator. Now, Tania, you went from the performing arts into technology with a BA in theater. You worked as a curator in theater, and then you became a brand evangelist for a software company, Axosoft, to now you are author of Creative Trespassing. Now, I'm just thinking here, you may have found success in inspiring those technologists and workaholics in tech to get out from under a rock and find that freedom, and believe that it could actually spark greater productivity, creativity, and happiness. And that's why you decided to go off and write the book, because you realized, wow, this works.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, yeah, a fewfold. First of all, I decided to write the book because I did find myself being invited to speak in more companies, more specifically tech companies, who were obsessed in innovation and creativity, and they wanted to bring more of that inside. And I would give talks, and afterwards, people would approach me and in hushed tones say, I also have a degree in theater, or I paint on the weekends, or, I like to dance. And I realized, if you're looking for innovation, you need to bring your creativity and imagination from the outside inside to your job. There was a disconnect between people's creativity and what they did during the day, or, between who we are and what we do. And I thought, oh my gosh, we could solve the innovation problem if we actually brought all of our imagination and cool ideas that we leave for the weekend into our everyday lives. So that was sort of the impetus for writing Creative Trespassing. And you're absolutely correct. All through the book, I have these exercises called productive disruptions. And they're called that because you actually get more work done when you break the patterns or habits that are keeping you stuck in what you were talking about, this sort of cycle of thinking, I need to stay at my desk and sweat and hurt myself to come up with a good idea. That will never happen.
Can you give us an example of a productive disruption exercise that's in your book that you could probably share with us over the radio?
Yeah, I mean, these are ones that, again, they can be anything from like a 10-minute email everyone on your team and say, we are going to take a dance break, or we're going to take a creative writing break. 10 minutes, meet us in the boardroom, and we'll come up with an idea. Somebody says, okay, the topic for this dance is hip hop. And then everybody dances for 10 minutes in the form of hip hop. And automatically, you've literally disrupted your neural pathways. You're thinking clearly, you're fresh. And then when you go back to your desk, you're going to have some fresh ideas. And in fact, there's actually a study I cite in Creative Trespassing from Stanford, and it's the walking and creativity study. They literally studied that people who went for walks when they were experiencing like blocks in creativity experienced creativity 60% higher when they came back from walking. So this is, scientifically proven, as well as, my own practice is getting up, leaving the desk. I don't typically dance because I work by myself. So, it's an audience of one.
They
but
always say dance like no one's watching.
You dance like no one's watching. I do.
No one is watching.
What was I thinking? I'm going to start today. I'm doing it right now. Can you see me? I'm cabbage patching. Yeah. So it's these simple like disruptions in our everyday. Look, most people are afforded a break during their workday. It can be a 10-minute break, a 15-minute break. What they do with it typically is stay at their desk and show their bosses they're sweating it out. Forget that. You're never going to add value to your life or to anybody else's life if you're staying stuck in a rut. Get up, go for a walk, dance like nobody's watching, Yeah.
But how do you get people to, or actually convince them that everybody's creative and that you do need to have those step away moments in order to release or unlock that creativity?
Yes. Well, first of all, a lot of people conflate creativity with being an artist. And automatically, right. Okay. And so if you're like, I'm not creative because i.e. I'm not an artist, you're already creating this like, I can't be that. I haven't trained for years. I didn't go to painting school or whatever. Creativity, literally, if you look up the word, is about accessing your imagination. That's it.
It's just accessing new ideas, something new, something different.
Absolutely. But now this is where, I write about in the book where actually people who are practicing or just starting off stretching their creative muscles, they can actually learn from artists because, coming from the arts, one thing that we are trained to do is ask what if questions. So it's, we can start off with let's say we're trying to solve a problem of, chairs that aren't comfortable at work. And so we circle around, we're like, well, let's make it a soft back, or let's make it a cushiony chair, or whatever. But if we start asking what if questions, we can ask really outlandish, wild questions. Like, what if it wasn't a chair at all? What if it was actually a microphone that was soft and we can sit on it and then amplify? I mean, by asking what if questions, it allows us to go into the absurd and then find actually, solutions to pressing problems that work. I mean, we've already if you've tried the same ways of solving problems and it's not working, then give creativity a try and start off with a what if question.
What are some of the greatest takeaways from the books that you hope that people ultimately walk away with and put into practice?
Two things. One is that our jobs and the fields in which we work, they don't have to be uniquely creative or imaginative for us to actually be uniquely creative or imaginative within our jobs. That is true. I've worked in very traditional jobs and sometimes even rigid cultures, and have managed to bring in more joy and imagination, and it's actually added value to what I was supposed to do in my job. And the other reason and the other takeaway that I want people to have with creative trespassing is to feel like they are free even within the hours of 9 to 5. I want to create a creative revolution inside our bodies, minds, and cubicles. There. It's a big goal, but I think we can do it.
I know your book hasn't been out for that long, but is there anything quotable from it that people have come up to you and said, oh my gosh, I'm going to use this forever?
That's a great question because yes, it's been out for just a little bit now, and people have been writing and coming up to me because I'm speaking so much. And in fact, they're actually talking in full sentences and not sound bites, which makes me feel like we're on the right path. And they're expressing how they feel about reading it. So I have a lot of people who consider themselves creatives and or artists. And the book, is affirming to the fact that, oh my gosh, I've been functioning like this. I talk to my colleagues. I invite them to lunch and learns, even though we don't have sanctioned lunch and learns. I've been doing this for years, and nobody's been saying that's okay. I've just been doing it on my own. So those who fancy themselves creatives are feeling affirmed and also getting new tools for creatively trespassing. And then people who are like, I'm not creative at all, this is weird, are going, this is not that weird. And in fact, they're really loving. I mean, it's part memoir. I share stories about my own upbringing as an outsider, and I'd be hard pressed to say that there's one person who's not an outsider at some point in our lives. And so they've talked about the value in outsiders kind of bringing inside their interesting point of view. So everybody on all ends of the creative, non-creative spectrum seem to be enjoying and being inspired by creative trespassing.
And I think just as we wrap up here, you brought up a good point. One of the biggest obstacles for creativity is the fear of thinking and expressing or doing something different. How do you get rid of that? You
go right into the eye of the fear. You lean into the fear. That is the only way to do it. I am not lying. And in fact, a good indicator of whether or not I accept a job or a client is if it simultaneously scares me and thrills me. I don't want to do anything that is safe or tried and true because I've already done it. Thank you so much, Tania Katan, author of Creative Trespassing, How to Put the Spark and Joy Back into Your Work and Life.
With that, we're going to wrap up today's show. Check out the show notes over at killerinnovations.com. Love to hear from you. Drop me a note, phil@killerinnovations.com, or hop over to the innovators.community. That's where I hang out. Love to chat with you. Talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Podcasting nonstop since 2005, this has been the Killer Innovation Show on the Innovators Network.